All right, everybody, welcome back. This is part 2 of our Chapter 2 video. So we were talking about benefits, and now we're looking kind of at program supplies. I wanted you to think about program supplies in terms of education, because that's our industry. We're looking at basically higher education in education. We find there are two major program costs in education if you're going to be a dean or chair of a university department. Number one is technology, to teach teachers how to use technology. That is the major expense. This costs a lot of money. It really is the major program expense. And then the other one is early childhood manipulates and materials for early childhood classrooms. If you want to create a good learning environment for early childhood instructors to learn pedagogy, you have to put manipulatives out there. You have to let them use that stuff. So I strongly recommend that if you're ever a department chair, your program supplies are going to go to technology and early childhood manipulants. So office supplies. These can be things like paper, printer cartridges. I argue, and I mentioned that sometimes these are done at the department level, where the department gets a certain allegation based on what the institution says is fair and equitable. I think that is equally important as well, because the institution has to have an idea of what fair and equitable looks like based on supplies and equipment. If somebody's going to be printing a lot of their own stuff off, what does that look like, and how much is that going to cost? So computer equipment and software. There's a massive difference between want and needs for computers. Here's what I tell you, if I'm in charge of a department, and this is what I used in public K-12 education. PC-based computers were 5 years. If I was using a Dell, a Gateway, Compaq, any of HP, 5 years, and then the equipment was replaced. For Macs, and I dealt with very few Mac labs, it was every 7 years they would normally get replaced. This was what I used, and this is what I did. I was in an upper class district though, and there wasn't a lot of damaging to the computers, so that should be considered. That this is what worked for me. It was 5 years for PCs, 7 years for Macs, and that kind of worked. I've seen different budgeting examples all throughout higher education. Communication. I thought this was kind of funny because, you know, Florida Southern does something unique. They do toll-free lines for incoming calls. That's interesting because then they have to get routed to a service person, and that service person is making money, where if you just call the department directly, that service person probably wouldn't be making that money, but they got a lot of people that are handling their tech support in terms of routing calls. So that has to be considered. You have things like purchase service contracts, usage fees for PDAs, and that can be built into the cost as well. Publications and printing. Higher education still does rely on heavily printed materials for advertising, for recruitment purposes, and I think we have to acknowledge that. Things like programs, handbooks, strategic plans, you're going to get these most of the time, they end up in the trash anyway. You're probably as guilty of that as I am. But one of the things that I say is legally it's a good idea to give printed materials to students as well. It protects yourself and the institution. If the student says, well, I never received blah, 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 well, you can say, here you go, you got it, and the student violated the law, and you're protecting yourself and you're protecting them. Postage. Think about how much this costs. When they're asking you for money, they're spending money to send it to you. So postage costs money as well, and it can come from enrollment, and it can come for enrollment issues and fundraising issues as well. So that can be an issue. They're trying to get your money and they're trying to solicit donations, so you got to pay for postage. Programming. One of the things right now, there are costs to build a program and to start it. Stetson, which is down the road from you guys, they're spending their money on a lot of culture programming because they have a master's degree in social justice education. So they're bringing in speakers. They're trying to be one of the world national leaders on this. It is an appropriate expense, and it's something that they need to consider as well. So professional development. These are things that faculty members use and need. These are things like registration for webinars, registration for fees and conferences, reimbursement for special courses taken, and it's normally the first thing that's cut by budget expenditures. K-12, they're going to get better professional development than a lot of people do in higher education. Higher education people tend to be the ones that are going to K-12 to deliver the professional development, but the professional development the faculty members get across the United States is very poor. If we were looking at this in another class, we could spend an entire class talking about inequities in PD for higher ed and in K-12, but the fact is it's not something that most institutions can afford or that they budget for, so I would tell you to keep that in mind. Periodicals and journals cost money. If it's a cost that you got to spend and institutions have to spend to give you access so that you can access articles that are published. I think faculty members pay for most of their personal dues to organizations. Then the institution then pays for membership fees as well. So you're looking at institutional fees, membership fees, personal fees. It can be a mess when you're trying to look at both of them. Travel. Institutions have to pay for travel. Think about if you were working in an institution that had a program set up on a branch campus. Well, that faculty member has to get their mileage paid from one location to the other and vice versa. For athletic programs, these are necessary costs because winning costs money and recruitment costs money as well. So you have to keep that in mind. Institutions need to ensure that people don't spend a lot of money when they're involved in travel arrangements as best as they possibly can, because you want to reduce costs as much as you possibly can, and this money starts to pile up. If you can afford to put people in a less expensive hotel, there's nothing wrong with that. But institutions sometimes will spare no expense and just cost more money, and it hurts people and it hurts salaries. Entertainment and gifts, it exists, it's out there. I don't want you to think about this in terms of donation for somebody. Thank you for coming to speak at our organization. Here's a check for $250. I'm thinking about when you go to a conference or meeting and there's tons of bottles of water and cans of pop that are everywhere. Those are institutional costs. Those are given to the visitors at the campus, and they definitely exist, and they're there. So entertainment and gifts are definitely something that's there as well. Facilities costs. Units may be charged for facility service, things like changing locks, moving furniture. They're not predictable because that can happen at many different times. Budgets need to account for these expenses though, when you're thinking about it. Utilities are increasing throughout the United States. We're going to talk a lot about this in Money in Schools, but really think about this in colleges. We used to operate on this Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. And remember, I want you to think about this from the traditional undergraduate perspective. You'd have your 50-minute classes Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then you'd have your hour and 15-minute classes Tuesday and Thursday, and then you always had your Saturday classes. What I have seen across the United States, a lot of institutions doing are switching to these Monday, Wednesday, and Tuesday, Thursday arrangements, closing campus on Friday because they know it has to be open on Saturday. Think about what you guys do. You have classes on Saturdays, you have classes in the evening because you're non-traditional students. The institution has to pay for that and utilities have to pay for it. If you can cut off Fridays, you've won, I mean, in my opinion, and that saves on utility costs. So contracted services, these are things like waste removal, copier maintenance, speakers, janitor services. K-12, this is big. Universities face it as well. It's a common expense at both public and private institutions. Excuse me. So debt services. If you are working in a smaller institution and you have a major expenditure, sometimes they have to get credit from a bank to fund operation. Then once the tuition comes in, the tuition revenue pays them back. I don't know if this is what Florida Southern did, but think about this in terms of your program that you're in right now. There had to be a lot of costs that were associated with this, not knowing that they were going to get a number of students. So did the institution take out a line of credit in order to supply for what the institution needed? That's quite a possibility. Scholarships and fellowships are another consideration as well. This is something that can be offset by tuition revenues. In different people can, different parts of the scholarship can be used for the expenditures that are associated with the scholarship as well. For instance, person gets a $2,000 a year scholarship, but they have to go to the state capitol to speak. Well, you're getting the scholarship, but then you're paying $1,000 for that person to go to the state capitol and speak. So there are costs associated with scholarships and fellowships as well. For fellowships, this could be office space as well. That can have to be built in as well. So miscellaneous items, I think that anytime you see a big miscellaneous expense, there are problems because if you are an embezzler, you're going to embezzle from the miscellaneous fund. So pay attention to this because you might not see what those expenses are, but trust me, they're there and they're part of the organization. So that's it. Chapter 3 is going to be used to tie 1 and 2 together. 4 is going to look at budget management, and if I can do anything to help you, let me know. Hope you got something out of this chapter, and look forward to us continuing our discussion. Thank you.